Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to put on our language analyst hats because we're going to decode a really high-stakes diplomatic standoff. But here's the twist. We're not just looking at the headlines. We're going to analyze the words themselves. We'll show you exactly how language becomes a weapon in the battle between nations.
So, imagine you're watching the news, and you hear a statement just like this. Wow. It's a linguistic minefield, isn't it? Words like radical, clerics, geopolitical, pure theology. These are not just random words. They are so carefully chosen to frame your understanding of the situation. It is so easy to feel lost in the jargon, but trust me, that's exactly where the real story is hiding.
So, how in the world do we defuse this linguistic bomb? Well, that is exactly what this explainer is all about. We're going to give you a 4-part toolkit to help you dissect the language of any news report, and we're going to use the tense standoff between the US and Iran as our live case study. Think of this as your guide to reading between the lines. All right, let's dive right in. Tool number 1, master the vocabulary. You know, in the world of international relations, words are basically currency. They can be weapons, they can be shields, or they can be the very foundation of an entire argument. So let's define the key terms that are really shaping this conflict.
First up, sanctions. You hear this word all the time. Think of it as the main weapon in modern economic warfare. This is way more than just a penalty. It's a very calculated strategy designed to exert crippling financial pressure. And in this story, it's absolutely central to everything.
Now just look at how a single word changes absolutely everything. Iran doesn't just call the sanctions unfair or tough. They call them illegal. This isn't just them complaining. This is a brilliant strategic move. By framing the sanctions as a violation of international law, Iran is trying to seize the moral high ground and completely change the terms of the debate before negotiations can even start. Okay, now for a term that raises the stakes to the absolute maximum, existential threat. This is some pretty serious stuff. It's basically diplomatic language for, we believe our very survival is on the line. This isn't just a negotiation tactic. It is a declaration of a final, uncrossable red line.
And right here, we see its power in action. This is not just an expression of fear. Oh no, this is a very calculated warning. It's a way of signaling that any more pressure will be met with an absolute response. And notice how they deliberately leave the nature of that response ambiguous? Yeah, that makes it way more intimidating. Okay, let's move on to our second tool. Once you've got the key terms down, you can start to see how each side uses them to build a completely different story, a different narrative, around the exact same set of facts. Let's see how that actually plays out.
Check this out. The US frame paints Iran as this irrational partner run by radical clerics who operate on pure theology, making any deal incredibly complicated. But then you flip over to the Iranian frame, and it's a story of simplicity. They're saying they're ready for compromise and that the ball is in America's court. It's just a simple test of America's sincerity. See that? 2 completely different stories, built from the same reality. Now for our third tool, we need to dig a little deeper. Beyond all the surface-level arguments about sanctions and deals, there's a much more fundamental question that is basically poisoning the entire process, and that is the whole debate over regime change. I mean, this is the issue that just poisons the well. How can you have good faith negotiations with a country when its leader is publicly saying it would be a very good thing to see your government overthrown? The Iranian official calls it a mixed signal, but let's be honest, it's more than that. It fundamentally undermines any possibility of trust right from the start. And what's fascinating here is that the arguments for and against regime change exist side by side in the very same news reports. On the one hand, you've got the argument for intervention, citing the regime's brutality and its supposed irrationality. And on the other, you have a stark warning against it, pointing to the risk of a massive regional war and the hypocrisy of talking peace while pushing for an overthrow. This is definitely not a simple issue with a clear answer. Okay, for our final tool, we're going to bring it all back down to earth, because words like sanctions, geopolitics, and negotiations are not just abstract concepts. They have a real, tangible, and often devastating effect on the lives of millions and millions of people. So let's start with just a single number, 60%. That is the soaring inflation rate in Iran. That abstract political chess move we call sanctions, well, it turns into this number, a truly devastating blow to the financial security of ordinary people. And this chart, this is what 60% inflation actually feels like on a daily basis.
It is not just a number on a screen, it's the price of essentials like cooking oil, rice, and chicken skyrocketing by up to 75% in just 1 year. Can you imagine? It's the daily struggle just to put food on the table.
So when you strip away all the geopolitical strategies and the economic data, this is what you're left with. This is the simple human cost. This is what happens when diplomatic language becomes a painful reality for millions.
But it's really important to understand this isn't just about sanctions. The reports also make it clear that many Iranians point to internal factors too. Years and years of economic mismanagement, widespread corruption, and a growing desire to change the entire system. The full picture, as always, is way more complex. So there you have it. We've done a deep dive, right? We've deconstructed one very complex international story, and in doing so, we've built a pretty practical toolkit that you can now use to analyze any news report you come across.
It's really a simple 4-step process. First, define the key terms. Second, compare the narratives each side is trying to build. Third, find the core debate that's really driving the conflict. And finally, and this is so important, always follow the language down to its real-world human impact. With these steps, you stop being a passive audience and you really become an active analyst.
So the next time you turn on the news or read an article, listen closely. Like, really listen. Listen for the specific words being used, look for the frames being built, and then ask yourself, beyond all the headlines, what story is really being told?